think so. I think so.
Tend to think that they know what's best for the kids. They don't ask the kid what they want.
ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡೋದು ಸರಿ ಇರಲ್ಲ. ಅದನ್ನ ನಮಗೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕೇಳಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು.
When you're younger, adults tend to assume that you cannot make your own decisions. And maybe there are some decisions you cannot make, but you should have the right to choose some things for yourself.
They won't know what my problems are if they don't really hear whatever I say.
ನನಗೆ ಏನು ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ಯಾರು ಡಿಸೈಡ್ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ.
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯನ ಕೇಳಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಅನಿಸಿಕೆ ಅವೆಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅವ್ರು ದೊಡ್ಡವರು ನಿರ್ಧಾರ ತಗೋಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ.
ನನಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾದರೆ ನನ್ನ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು. ಎಲ್ಲ ಇಡೀ ರಾಜ್ಯದಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಬಡ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆಲ್ಲ ಸಂಬಂಧ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳನ್ನೇ ಬಂದು ನೇರವಾಗಿ ಮಾತಾಡೋದು.
ಅವ್ರ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಬೇರೆ ಥರ ಇರ್ತದೆ, ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಬೇರೆ ಇರ್ತದೆ. ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನಲ್ಲೇ ಆಗಿ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ನಿಜವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಗುರಿ ಮುಟ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ, ಅವರ ಸ್ವಂತ ಆಗಿ ಅವರು ಬೆಳಿಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ.
Adults today have created a world in which children have very little say in what they wish to study, careers, or in their choice of life partners, where children spend more time glued to books, learning abstract concepts, rather than in the real world, understanding them.
Porque los adultos creen que ellos son los únicos poseedores de la verdad y que todo tiene que girar en torno a ellos y que ellos saben todo, y los niños solo seríamos como receptores de informaciones y de conocimientos transmitidos por adultos. De eso, de que los adultos son pues como lo único que hay en la sociedad y no reconocen en nosotros todas las capacidades, todas nuestras historias de vida, todas las realidades que se viven desde el ser niño o niña. Entonces es más como eso, la sociedad adultocentrista.
When people have their own choices and decisions.
ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿ ಅಂದರೆ ಮಾತನಾಡೋದಕ್ಕ, ನಾನೇ ಧೈರ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳುವುದಕ್ಕ.
ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ನಮ್ಮ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯನ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸಕ್ಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ.
ನಮ್ಮದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳನ್ನು ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರ ಮುಂದೆ ಹೇಳೋದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸೋದು. ಅವರು ಪೂರೈಸಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋದು ಅವ್ರ ಹಕ್ಕು.
Participation is actually the natural instinct of every human being. It is a compulsion to engage, the need to communicate, the need to understand, through being a member of the community or larger group. But there are different kinds of participation. As we saw in the old Soviet bloc, where children were organized into unions, but their participation was purely cultural. We, on the other hand, are talking about a very important form of participation that is critical, and that is political participation.
When we talk of children's right to participation, we are talking about children being able to intervene in decisions which affect their lives.
Nosotros decimos que somos protagonistas de nuestra propia vida y que por lo tanto podemos transformarla y ayudar. Ser protagonistas también requiere muchas cosas. Primero, tener calidad. Calidad, cuando hablamos de calidad, es poder opinar y ejercer esa participación que todos tenemos. ನಾವೇ ಆಯ್ಕೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸೋದಂತಾಗಲಿ, ನಾವೇ ಅಂದರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ವಿಷಯನ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನೀವು ಆಯ್ಕೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ, ನೀವು ಹೋಗಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಬೇಕೋ ಆ ರೀತಿನ ನೀವು ಬಳಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿ ಇಲ್ಲ.
Engagement is inseparable from empowerment. Participation can be of various kinds on a continuum from positive to negative.
Children's rights can be seen as three major components that are interlinked. The first component is protection, which all children need. Protection from abuse, harmful information. The other provision is related to providing education, healthcare, food, shelter and other needs of children. This provision is of course essential, but all rights cannot be reduced to just provision. The third and very important cross-cutting set of rights is participation. Now, if these three rights are seen separately, they make very little sense. But when they are seen together, that gives children's rights a much deeper meaning and a much far-reaching impact.
ಅಂದರೆ ಫಸ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಬೆಂಬಲ ಮಾಡಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಪೋಷಕರು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ನಾವೊಂದು ಸಂಘ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗಿರಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ನಾನು 6ನೇ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋದ ತರಬೇತಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಬೇಕಾಗಿರಲಿ ನೆರವು ಕೊಟ್ಟರು ನಮ್ಮ ಪೋಷಕರು. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ CWC ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯವರು ನಮಗೆ ತರಬೇತಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು, ಸಂಘ ಮಾಡೋದು ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಟ್ರು. ಅವರದ್ದು ನೆರವು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಇದ್ದೇ ಇದೆ. ಬರೀ ದೊಡ್ಡವರ ಸಹಾಯನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ, ನಾವು ಮಾತ್ರ ಕಟ್ಕೊಂಡ್ವಿ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಹೇಳೋದಿಲ್ಲ.
Creo que hay mucho que hablar del rol del adulto y hay mucho que aprender, ¿sí? Pienso que estamos iniciando esta nueva relación que nos plantea el protagonismo y es ahí donde creo que la apertura y la escucha que tiene que tener el adulto creo que puede posibilitar un aporte pedagógico importante, ¿sí? A los chicos, ¿no? Pero no por los niños, sino por nosotros.
It's one thing to accept in theory that yes, children need to have a say and apply it in all arenas to make sure that the kids have the kind of information they need to be able to participate well, and not just based on their own experience, so that they're able to make informed decisions, informed choices. Adults also have a role to create safe spaces for children, because the minute we allow for children to be able to speak, then they are likely to also say things which are not in line with what adults are thinking. So it means there can actually be some repercussions on the children. So the whole role of adult facilitation is not to drag children into the games we play in terms of our own settings, but actually changing the rules of the game, redefining the game and actually redefining it in partnership with children.
Anche, questo vale anche per i parlamenti, per noi, che non si può decidere sopra i bambini o i ragazzi, ma bisogna decidere con i ragazzi.
The underprivileged are the most affected. They need to participate to give their life meaning and to transform it to one closer to their aspirations.
ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್ ಅಂತ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ನೆನೆಸಿದ ಕೂಡಲೇ ನಾವು ಆರ್ಥಿಕವಾಗಿ ಆಲೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಆದರೆ ಅದರಿಂದ ಜನ, ಊರು ಮತ್ತು ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಅದು ಹೇಗೆ ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಬೀರುತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನೋಡೋದು ತುಂಬ ಮುಖ್ಯ.
Around the world, it has always been the most marginalized, most oppressed kids who have been at the helm of saying we want to be heard.
The concern for working children was really born out of the trade union movement. We were all trade unionists working in the informal, unorganized sector of labor, and we found that there was a large percentage of child workers. So we found that this was very untenable, that there were so many children working and they had no kind of protection, there were no laws governing their work, there was no safety measures implemented, there was not even a minimum wage. And children began to question this. They said that aren't we workers too? So we explained to them that the law was silent and they did not recognize children as workers at that point. And children, in their perfect childlike logic, they said, well, if that's the law, let's change it. So we began this whole process of drafting a new legislation. So there were two parallel exercises. One was we were drafting a law, a bill, and the children were also doing their own drafting. We wanted a law that was not not punitive, but was also developmental. We wanted a law that actually protected children, allowed for their education, gave them opportunities for growth and development. Children looked at the more immediate. They saw themselves as workers, and they looked at issues like protection, they looked at minimum wages. We sort of merged the two drafts, what the children had said and what we wanted. This whole thing was a very exciting process where the children presented it to the state government, and Ramakrishna Hegde, who was the chief minister at the time, felt that it was a concurrent subject and that we could get a national legislation. So he gave us money to take the children to Delhi, and present it in front of the Labour Ministers' Conference. It was received very well. Anjaya, who was the minister at the time, found it a very exciting possibility, and we were on a small drafting committee to draft the final bill, what they call the government bill. Unfortunately, when the legislation actually was enacted in 1986, there was a lot to be desired. But the outcome of that was that children felt the strength of coming together.
ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಅವರ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯಗಳನ್ನು ಅವರ ತೀರ್ಮಾನಗಳನ್ನು ಒಂದು ರಾಜಕೀಯ ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟಿದ್ರು. ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ದುಡಿಯೋ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಒಟ್ಟಾಗಿಯೇ ಇರ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರು, ಒಂದು ಗುಂಪಾಗಿಯೇ ಇರ್ತಾಯಿದ್ರು. ಆದರೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ ನಿಜವಾಗಿ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂಥದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಮಾದರಿಗಳು, ಸರಿಯಾದ ಒಂದು ಗುರುತು, ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ವಾತಾವರಣ ಮತ್ತು ಒಂದು ನಿಜವಾದ ಒಂದು ಮಾರ್ಗದರ್ಶನ ಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಮತ್ತು ಈ ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಇರುವ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಣ್ಣ ಸಣ್ಣ ಗುಂಪುಗಳನ್ನು ಒಂದು ವೈಶಾಲ್ಯ ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಒಟ್ಟು ತರಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಟ್ಟಿದ್ದರು. ಆ ನೆಲೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಭೀಮಾ ಸಂಘನ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದರು.
ಭೀಮಾ ಸಂಘದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಒಂದು ನಮ್ಮ ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯ CWC ಸಂಸ್ಥೆಯ ಒಂದು ಕನಸು ಕೂಡ ಹೌದು. ಫಸ್ಟು 1990 ಏಪ್ರಿಲ್ 30ಕ್ಕೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ ಫಸ್ಟು ಉದ್ಘಾಟನೆ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಅದೇ ವರ್ಷ 1990ರಲ್ಲಿ ನವೆಂಬರ್ 14ಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಉದ್ಘಾಟನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಯಾಕೆ ಆ ಸಂಘಟನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂದರೆ ನಮ್ಮಂಥ ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಆ ಸಂಘಟನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ದುಡಿಯೋ ಮಕ್ಕಳಂತ ನಾವು ಗುರುತಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ, ಮತ್ತು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ದುಡಿಯೋ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತೀರ್ಮಾನ ಆಗುವಲ್ಲಿ ಅದು ಸ್ಥಳೀಯ ಮಟ್ಟದಿಂದ ಅಂತಾರಾಷ್ಟ್ರೀಯ ಮಟ್ಟ ತನಕನೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ದುಡಿಯೋ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಪ್ರತಿನಿಧಿತ್ವ ಇರಬೇಕು.
In terms of working children and having an impact, something very remarkable was started actually in 1991 with the formation of the International Working Group on Child Labour. Nandana Reddy was its chairperson.
The International Working Group was actually a research-based initiative. We were supposed to do research in 36 countries of the world on conditions of children's work, and the results were supposed to inform international policy. At that time, there were also several movements of working children in Africa, Asia and Latin America that were very active and very vocal. And I managed to convince the committee, the International Working Group, that we should allow children into this whole discussion. What we did was we tried to get children from the Asian continent together. And there were children from Nepal, children from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, children from, of course, all over India, who came together as the beginning to share their concerns and discuss what are the commonalities, what are the kinds of changes they wanted in international policy regarding working children. The sequel to that was that we managed to get all these movements from these three continents together in Kundapur in 1996, which was the birth of the international movement on working children.
They met with policymakers from around the world who came down to listen to them. Save the Children, UNICEF, also from the Ministry of Amsterdam, who were there. And there they actually talked of the meeting of the ILO they were planning in the Netherlands, where they were going to look at the new ILO convention addressing child labor. And the children got up and said, but why are we not being invited? You need to listen to us if you're talking about, our rights.
The international movement was founded at Kundapur at a very fortunate time, because internationally there already was a lot of work going into structure the international conversations about a new child labor convention. The children claimed the right to participate under Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which guarantees children a right to be heard in matters pertaining to them.
And to their credit, the team which was looking at the organizing this took that seriously, made an effort with the International Working Group of Child Labor to bring kids to Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam, these working children were on equal footing with all the other members of the tripartite, the ILO tripartite, which is employers, governments and workers. with trade unions. And it was the most amazing event, because this was the first time, I think, in the history of the world perhaps, where governments and employers listened to working children directly.
Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, Mr. Director General, representatives of working children, ladies and gentlemen.
ನಾವು ಇವತ್ತು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತು ಮಾತನಾಡ್ತಿರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಚರಿತ್ರೆನೇ ಇದೆ.
In Amsterdam, children could not have been forgotten. The fact that child labor was not just a disease, but consisted of little living human beings that had a voice, that had an opinion, and that wanted to transform their situations, could not be ignored. But unfortunately, the reaction to that was a very, very strong one. The trade unions came down extremely strongly against the international movement of working children. And the invitation that was extended to these children for the next conference, which was to be held in Sweden, was actually withdrawn at the last moment. This resistance continued and also resulted in the disbanding of the International Working Group. I think the reason for this resistance was because both the International Working Group on Child Labour and the International Movement of Working Children became an extremely strong pressure group. At the same time, what was interesting was at the Karnataka level where we were functioning, we found that we had a tremendous amount of success in being able to actually remove all forms of hazardous labour for children. So we were able to declare panchayats child labour free. So we said that we needed to also look at expanding our base and looking at all marginalized groups of children.
So when they had the idea for a larger structure with elected bodies, they said let there be representation for children who are from the working children's group, children from the school going group and the migrant group and any other group which would be relevant in different panchayats, and that representatives who come together, they form the Makkala Panchayat or the Children's Panchayat.
ಗೆದ್ದರ ನಂತರ ಮಕ್ಕಳದೇ ಒಂದು ಪಂಚಾಯಿತಿ ಆದಮೇಲೆ ಈ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳನ್ನು ಮಕ್ಕಳದಿಂದ ನಮ್ಮ ದೊಡ್ಡವರ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಕೂಡ ಪರಿಹಾರ ಆಗಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಆಯಿತು.
And the Children Panchayat would interact regularly, constantly with the local government through an intermediate body called the task force. So at the task force, you would have members of the adult panchayat and members of the children's panchayat, but sitting together as equals. And this structure was created in 57 panchayats where we are working, which was an entire block. So we were actually able to have a very strong response from the local government in support of this in that entire taluk. So which is covering over 65,000 children who have been part of this process.
Nandroli is a small village of 80 to 90 houses in Keradi Panchayat of Kundapur Taluk. Children there are going to school. Many of their family members, brothers and fathers were drinking a lot. In Keradi, in addition to licensed liquor, unlicensed liquor was being sold in vegetable shops, under the trees and government-run grocery shops. Children were very affected by it. So members of Bhima Sangha and Makkala Panchayat discussed this issue and raised it in their local government meeting. But the government did not pay any heed. So children again discussed why the government refused to take their views into account. They felt if we keep the exact figures and if we calculate the expenditure on alcohol, then maybe that will be useful. So on the first day, they went to the unlicensed liquor shops, such as vegetable shops or a petty shop, and cleaned up the surroundings. On an average, they collected 300 packets of liquor. Each packet cost 11 rupees. So they calculated per day it was 3,300 rupees. And for 1 year it was 11,88,000 rupees. Even they were surprised to see that so much is being spent in the village on liquor. The Grama Panchayat had invited them to take part in Independence Day celebrations. At this event, they presented the information that they had collected. Many important people were there: headmasters, teachers, special invitees, Taluk Panchayat members and children. When the children presented this information, the local government did not know how to respond. They were too embarrassed that they had to learn about these facts from children. So everyone present there put pressure on the government, and it was a success.
If you heard what the kids in Keradi have done, just imagine if all kids in India had a chance to do that. And we are crores in population, and 31% of our Indian population is children. So with the adults in our country, we have the adult Gram Sabhas, where every adult member of that community or every citizen of that community actually meet together and can take and should take all decisions related to that village. And initially we did encourage the kids to be part of that Gram Sabha. But what we also saw was that the way that space was conducted, it was not very comfortable for children. So the idea of having a special Gram Sabha for all children of that village to come and interact with the government officially, that idea was actually launched in 2002.
ನಮ್ಮ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳನ್ನು ಬಗೆಹರಿಸುತ್ತೀರಿ ಎಂಬ ಆಶಾಭಾವನೆಯನ್ನು ನಾನು ಇಟ್ಟುಕೊಳ್ಳುತ್ತಾ ನನ್ನೆರಡು ಮಾತುಗಳಿಗೆ ಪೂರ್ಣ ವಿರಾಮ ಹಾಕುತ್ತಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಜೈ ಹಿಂದ್, ಜೈ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ.
I think that the fact that Karnataka has actually ordered every Gram Panchayat to hold a Makkala Gram Sabha is a very far-reaching decision and a great achievement for the children's rights movement. It is for the first time that a government has recognized children as citizens, and children as citizens who have the right to input into development of policy and program, the distribution of budgets, expenditures, etc.
It's not children want to do that planning and they are the most qualified and they can provide it. It is not to substitute the governance thing, but to enlighten it. And where necessary, put pressure. We'll be on the right track.
If the children's rights movement can come this far in this state, we should emulate this in other states as well as other parts of the world.
ನಮ್ಮ 45,000 ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಆಯ್ಕೆಯಿಂದ ಲುಕ್ಸಂಬರ್ಗ್ ಎಂಬ ಪ್ರದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ವಿದೇಶದಲ್ಲೂ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಪಂಚಾಯತ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ.
This model with Bhima Sangha was able to create has actually been a role model for many countries of the world. Mongolia is one example. We've also had a lot of interest from countries like UK who want to do something similar with their local government. We have a lot of interest from Scandinavian and European countries, Luxembourg. We've had Sweden, we've had Norway, wanting to see what they can do with their youth councils in a similar model where children are participating in a really meaningful way.
It is a great privilege for us to nominate these three organizations who work to promote the rights of children as Nobel Peace Prize laureates for 2012. Concerned for Working Children, Save the Children, and UNICEF.
ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುವುದರ ಮೂಲಕ ಅವರು ಕೇವಲ ಇವತ್ತು ತಮಗೆ ಏನು ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಆಲೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಮುಂದೆ ತಮಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ಜಗತ್ತು ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ಕೂಡ ನೋಡ್ತಾರೆ. ತಮಗೆ ಸಿಗುವ ಸೇವೆಯ ಮೌಲ್ಯಗಳು ಏನು, ಅದು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದರೆ ತಮಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಅನುಕೂಲ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ತೀರ್ಮಾನ ಮಾಡುವುದರಿಂದಾಗಿ ಅವರ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುವಿಕೆ ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುವಿಕೆ ಅವರು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸೋದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ಇಡೀ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ಹೊಸ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ.
ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಸ್ವರ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಸ್ವರವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಮುಚ್ಚಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದು ನಿಜವಾಗಿಯೂ ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಜಗತ್ತು ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಸ್ವರ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು, ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡುವಂಥದ್ದು ತೀರಾ ಅಗತ್ಯ ಇದೆ. ಆ ತಪ್ಪನ್ನು ಸರಿ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಮಗೆ ಅನಿಸಿದ್ದು ಇದ್ದ ಒಂದೇ ದಾರಿ, ಅವರ ಸ್ವರವನ್ನು ನಿಜವಾಗಿಯೂ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿಸುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ಕಟ್ಟಬೇಕು ಮತ್ತು ಆ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಕಟ್ಟುವಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಇರಬೇಕು.
This is one thing we adults absolutely have to understand, that when we respect children's right to participation, it is not because we feel benevolent, that we feel kindly, but that if we do not do that, then we are violating their rights, and we have no business to do that.
Unlike the labor movement and the women's movement, the children's rights movement has always been a peaceful struggle. Children always seem to find win-win solutions and understand that we adults do not like to lose face. That is why we, the Concern for Working Children, see our nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize not just as a recognition of our work to champion the cause of children's rights, especially the right to participation, but as a recognition of the working children's peaceful struggle for the past 100 years. We must remember that children do not remain children, they grow up. So if we recognize their right to shape the world we live in, if we enable their participation in all arenas, and if we respect and more importantly listen to their concerns, we will be building a more equitable, just and peaceful world.
ಕೊಡಿ ಹೊಸ ನಾಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟಲೆಂದು ಹೊಸ ಬೀಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ರಚಿಸಲೆಂದು ನವ ಸಮಾಜದ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿಗಾಗಿ ನವ ಪ್ರಪಂಚದ ನಿರ್ಮಾಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಹಳೆಯ ಬೇರಿನ ಹೊಸ ಚಿಗುರಿಗಾಗಿ ನವ ಸಮಾಜದ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿಗಾಗಿ ನವ ಪ್ರಪಂಚದ ನಿರ್ಮಾಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಹಳೆಯ ಬೇರಿನ ಹೊಸ ಚಿಗುರಿಗಾಗಿ ನಮಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ ಎಳೆಯ ಕೈಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ ಹೊಸ ನಾಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟಲೆಂದು ಹೊಸ ಬೀಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ರಚಿಸಲೆಂದು ಹೊಸ ದಾರಿಯೊಂದ ನಾವು ತೋರುವೆವು ಹೊಸ ಹಾಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ಹಾಡುವೆವು ಹೊಸ ದೀಪವೊಂದ ನಾವು ಹಚ್ಚುವೆವು ನಮಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ ಎಳೆಯ ಕೈಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ ಹೊಸ ನಾಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟಲೆಂದು ಹೊಸ ಬೀಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ರಚಿಸಲೆಂದು ನಮಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ ಎಳೆಯ ಕೈಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ ನಮಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ.
Children want to do that planning and they are the most qualified and they can provide it. It is not to substitute the governance thing, but to enlighten it. And where necessary, put pressure. We'll be on the right track.
If the children's rights movement can come this far in this state, we should emulate this in other states as well as other parts of the world.
ನಮ್ಮ 45,000 ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಆಯ್ಕೆಯಿಂದ ಲುಕ್ಸಂಬರ್ಗ್ ಎಂಬ ಪ್ರದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ವಿದೇಶದಲ್ಲೂ ತಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಪಂಚಾಯತ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹಂಚಿಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ.
This model with Bhima Sangha was able to create has actually been a role model for many countries of the world. Mongolia is one example. We've also had a lot of interest from countries like UK who want to do something similar with their local government. We have a lot of interest from Scandinavian and European countries, Luxembourg. We've had Sweden, we've had Norway, wanting to see what they can do with their youth councils in a similar model where children are participating in a really meaningful way.
It is a great privilege for us to nominate these three organizations who work to promote the rights of children as Nobel Peace Prize laureates for 2012. Concerned for Working Children, Save the Children, and UNICEF.
ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುವುದರ ಮೂಲಕ ಅವರು ಕೇವಲ ಇವತ್ತು ತಮಗೆ ಏನು ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಆಲೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಮುಂದೆ ತಮಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ಜಗತ್ತು ಹೇಗೆ ಅಂತ ಕೂಡ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ತಮಗೆ ಸಿಗುವ ಸೇವೆಯ ಮೌಲ್ಯಗಳು ಏನು, ಅದು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿದ್ದರೆ ತಮಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಅನುಕೂಲ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನು ತೀರ್ಮಾನ ಮಾಡುವುದರಿಂದಾಗಿ ಅವರ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುವಿಕೆ ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುವಿಕೆ ಅವರು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸೋದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ಇಡೀ ಪ್ರಜಾಪ್ರಭುತ್ವ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ಹೊಸ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ.
ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಸ್ವರ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಸ್ವರವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಮುಚ್ಚಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅದು ನಿಜವಾಗಿಯೂ ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆಯ ಜಗತ್ತು ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಸ್ವರ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು, ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡುವಂಥದ್ದು ತೀರಾ ಅಗತ್ಯ ಇದೆ. ಆ ತಪ್ಪನ್ನು ಸರಿ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ನಮಗೆ ಇದ್ದ ಒಂದೇ ದಾರಿ ಅವರ ಸ್ವರವನ್ನು ನಿಜವಾಗಿಯೂ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿಸುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯನ್ನು ಕಟ್ಟಬೇಕು ಮತ್ತು ಆ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಕಟ್ಟುವಲ್ಲಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಇರಬೇಕು.
This is one thing we adults absolutely have to understand, that when we respect children's right to participation, it is not because we feel benevolent, that we feel kindly, but that if we do not do that, then we are violating their rights and we have no business to do that.
Unlike the labor movement and the women's movement, the children's rights movement has always been a peaceful struggle. Children always seem to find win-win solutions and understand that we adults do not like to lose face. That is why we, the Concern for Working Children, see our nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize not just as a recognition of our work to champion the cause of children's rights, especially the right to participation, but as a recognition of the working children's peaceful struggle for the past 100 years. We must remember that children do not remain children, they grow up. So if we recognize their right to shape the world we live in, if we enable their participation in all arenas, and if we respect and more importantly listen to their concerns, we will be building a more equitable, just and peaceful world.
ಕೊಡಿ ಹೊಸ ನಾಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟಲೆಂದು ಹೊಸ ಬೀಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ರಚಿಸಲೆಂದು ನವ ಸಮಾಜದ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿಗಾಗಿ ನವ ಪ್ರಪಂಚದ ನಿರ್ಮಾಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಹಳೆಯ ಬೇರಿನ ಹೊಸ ಚಿಗುರಿಗಾಗಿ ನವ ಸಮಾಜದ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿಗಾಗಿ ನವ ಪ್ರಪಂಚದ ನಿರ್ಮಾಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಹಳೆಯ ಬೇರಿನ ಹೊಸ ಚಿಗುರಿಗಾಗಿ ನಮಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ, ಎಳೆಯ ಕೈಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ. ಹೊಸ ನಾಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟಲೆಂದು, ಹೊಸ ಬೀಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ರಚಿಸಲೆಂದು, ಹೊಸ ದಾರಿಯೊಂದ ನಾವು ತೋರುವೆವು, ಹೊಸ ಹಾಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ಹಾಡುವೆವು, ಹೊಸ ದೀಪವೊಂದ ನಾವು ಹಚ್ಚುವೆವು. ನಮಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ, ಎಳೆಯ ಕೈಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ. ಹೊಸ ನಾಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟಲೆಂದು, ಹೊಸ ಬೀಡನೊಂದ ನಾವು ರಚಿಸಲೆಂದು, ನಮಗೊಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಕೊಡಿ.